What if the very person sworn to protect you was the monster hunting you in the darkness? Welcome to Sherlock Mode. The year was 1974, and the quiet town of Visalia, California seemed like the perfect place to raise a family. Tree-lined streets, cozy homes, and neighbors who knew each other by name. But beneath this peaceful surface, something sinister was stirring. Someone was watching, waiting, learning the patterns of innocent families. It started small, almost like a game. Homes would be broken into, but nothing valuable was taken. Instead, the intruder seemed interested in something far more disturbing. Women's underwear would be scattered around. Personal items would be rearranged. It was as if someone was practicing, getting ready for something much worse. The people of Visalia called him the Visalia Ransacker. Over 20 months, he would strike more than 120 times. But on a September night in 1975, the game turned deadly. Claude Snelling heard noises outside his daughter's window. When he went to investigate, he found a masked man trying to kidnap his teenage daughter. In the struggle that followed, Claude was shot and killed. The ransacker had claimed his first victim. Then, just as suddenly as he appeared, the Visalia Ransacker vanished. But this was not the end. It was only the beginning of a nightmare that would haunt California for over a decade. In 1976, the terror moved north to Sacramento. But now, the crimes had evolved into something far more horrifying. The burglar had become a rapist. He called himself the East Area Rapist, and his methods were calculated and cruel. On December 18, 1976, 15-year-old Chris Pedretti was home alone, playing piano while her parents attended a Christmas party. At 6 p.m., as beautiful music filled the house, a masked figure appeared behind her. A knife pressed against her throat. His words would haunt her forever. "Do what I say, or I'll kill you, and be gone in the dark." For over 2 hours, Chris endured unspeakable horror. He would take her outside naked in the freezing winter cold, then bring her back inside to different rooms. When he finally left, she was blindfolded, bound, and gagged on a couch in front of the fireplace. But she survived, and her courage would help police understand the monster they were hunting. The East Area Rapist struck with military precision. He would study his victims for weeks, learning their routines, their relationships, their fears. He knew when husbands worked late, when children were at sleepovers, when wives were alone. He turned their own homes into prisons of terror. Between 1976 and 1979, he would attack at least 51 victims in the Sacramento area. Each crime was more terrifying than the last. He would tie up couples, balance dishes on their backs, and threaten to kill them if they moved. The sound of breaking dishes meant death was coming. But here's what made this case even more chilling. During this same time period, Joseph James DeAngelo was working as a police officer, first in Exeter, then in Auburn. The very man sworn to protect and serve was the one terrorizing innocent families. He had access to police files, crime scenes, and investigation details. He was always one step ahead because he was on the inside. In 1979, DeAngelo was fired from the Auburn Police Department for allegedly stealing a hammer and dog repellent from a drugstore. But losing his job didn't stop him. Instead, it pushed him to become even more dangerous. The attacks moved south to Southern California, and now they included murder. The East Area Rapist had become the original Night Stalker. Between 1979 and 1986, he would kill at least 12 more people, including couples in their own beds. Each murder was more brutal than the last. Then, in 1986, the attacks stopped completely. Had he moved away? Had he died? Had he simply decided to stop? For over 30 years, these questions haunted investigators and terrorized communities. The Golden State Killer, as he became known, had vanished like a ghost. Police had DNA evidence from the crime scenes, but it sat in the Cody's database for years without a match. They searched internationally, followed thousands of leads, and interviewed countless suspects. Nothing worked. The case grew cold, and hope began to fade. But in 2018, everything changed. A revolutionary technique called investigative genetic genealogy emerged. Instead of waiting for a perfect DNA match, investigators could now use family DNA to build family trees and identify suspects through their relatives. Investigator Paul Holes uploaded the Golden State Killer's DNA profile to a public genealogy database. Within hours, he found distant relatives. Then began the painstaking work of building a massive family tree, going back to great-great-grandparents in the 1840s and tracing every descendant forward. The family tree grew to over 1,000 people, but investigators knew their killer was a white male, born between 1940 and 1960, about 5 feet 8 inches tall, and had lived in California during the 1970s and 1980s. These clues helped them narrow down the massive tree to just 5 possible suspects. One name stood out: Joseph James DeAngelo, a former police officer who lived in the exact areas where the crimes occurred during the exact time periods. The pieces of the puzzle were finally coming together after 44 years. In April 2018, investigators began following the 72-year-old DeAngelo. They watched him shop at a Hobby Lobby store and secretly collected DNA from his car door handle when he left. But that sample wasn't quite enough for an arrest. 3 days later, they tried again. As DeAngelo put his trash cans out for collection, investigators were waiting. Hidden among the garbage, they found a used tissue. That single piece of tissue would finally bring justice to hundreds of victims and their families. The DNA from the tissue was a perfect match to evidence from the crime scenes. On April 24, 2018, Joseph James DeAngelo was arrested at his home in Citrus Heights, California. The Golden State Killer, who had terrorized California for over a decade, was finally in custody. On June 29, 2020, DeAngelo stood in a Sacramento courtroom and pleaded guilty to 13 counts of murder and numerous other charges. The man who had spent years hiding behind masks was finally exposed. Victims and their families, some now elderly, watched as justice was finally served. DeAngelo was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. But the most chilling part of this story isn't just what he did, it's how he hid in plain sight for so long. He was a police officer, a husband, a father, and a grandfather. His neighbors thought he was just a grumpy old man who yelled at people for walking too close to his house. The Golden State Killer case changed everything. It proved that no matter how much time passes, advances in science and technology can bring even the coldest cases back to life. Since DeAngelo's arrest, over 70 other cold cases have been solved using investigative genetic genealogy. The monsters hiding in our past can no longer count on time to protect them. If you enjoyed unraveling this mystery, like and subscribe to Sherlock Mode.